It only took one tweet to flip the entire narrative. In the fast-moving storm of American politics, where soundbites carry more weight than policy papers, one confrontation seized the nation's attention. The stage was set not in some grand marble chamber, but in the ruthless arena of the internet, a place where reputations are built, dismantled, and broadcast to millions in real time. Karoline Leavitt thought she had the upper hand. She moved first, swinging the weapon of modern politics, cancellation. With a carefully sharpened message, she attempted to strip Jasmine Crockett of credibility, to smear her as unworthy of her seat, her voice, her place in the conversation. It was bold, calculated, and dripping with the smug certainty that her audience would rally, laugh, and applaud. For a moment, it worked. Screens lit up with Karoline's attack. Headlines began to whisper. Commentators stirred the pot, framing it as the latest humiliation for Jasmine Crockett. In the whirlwind of noise, Karoline basked in the illusion of triumph. She had pressed post with the confidence of someone convinced the story was hers to write. But arrogance has a way of blinding the ambitious. Because Jasmine was not just any opponent. She was someone who had walked through storms far more vicious than a politician's cheap shot. She knew what it meant to be underestimated, dismissed, even erased, and she had learned long ago that the best responses aren't loud or frantic. They are precise, devastating, and impossible to ignore. So while Karoline celebrated the strike she thought had landed, Jasmine waited. Hours passed. The feeds kept spinning. Critics piled on. Supporters braced for a defense. And then, when the timing was perfect, Jasmine reached for her phone. No speech. No long-winded rebuttal. Just a few carefully chosen words. A single tweet. And within minutes, it was everywhere. Screenshots spread faster than wildfire. Supporters cheered, opponents fumbled, and the very networks that had been amplifying Karoline's attacks suddenly shifted focus. It was sharp. It was elegant. And it was lethal to the narrative Karoline had tried to control. We will show you that tweet, but first, you need to understand why this clash was so explosive, and why it mattered far beyond two politicians trading barbs online. Because this was not just about one insult or one clapback. It was about a bigger fight for dignity, truth, and the right to belong. And what happened next left the entire country in disbelief. To understand the weight of this clash, we need to step back and see exactly who Karoline Leavitt is, and why she thought targeting Jasmine Crockett was the smart move. Leavitt has built her brand on the sharp edge of culture war politics. Young, ambitious, and hungry for headlines, she's mastered the art of provocation. Every statement is designed to trend. Every jab is crafted to ignite outrage, not conversation. To her supporters, she's fearless. To her critics, she's reckless. But in her own mind, she is untouchable, an avatar of the new, ruthless right. And in the world of modern politics, cancellation isn't just a buzzword. It's a strategy, a weapon sharpened for maximum effect. One viral accusation, one distorted narrative, one gotcha moment can erase years of work in a heartbeat. Politicians use it to destroy reputations. Media outlets profit from amplifying it. And in Karoline's arsenal, it's become her favorite trick. So when she zeroed in on Jasmine Crockett, it wasn't random. Jasmine represented everything Karoline sought to undermine. A bold black woman who refused to soften her tone. A progressive voice unafraid to call out hypocrisy. An elected leader who embodied resilience and pride in the face of dismissals meant to silence her. In Karoline's playbook, Jasmine was the perfect target. Visible, outspoken, and easy to caricature in a few words. Karoline's attack was meant to be decisive. The calculation was simple. Strike hard, strike fast, and force Jasmine onto the defensive. After all, countless politicians have been dragged down by the weight of a single viral takedown. Once the public sees you as a joke, or is cancelled, the stain is hard to wash off. But here's where the plan faltered. Because Jasmine Crockett is not built to bow. Her entire career has been a fight against erasure, against voices telling her she was too loud, too radical, too unapologetic. For her, attacks like Karoline's aren't new. They're familiar terrain. Every insult hurled her way only sharpens her resolve. And far from silencing her, it fuels the fire. That's what Karoline didn't count on. She expected a flustered response. She wanted the stumble, the defensive press statement, the shaky televised rebuttal. But Jasmine didn't play her game. She understood something deeper. In a digital age, power lies not in who yells first, but in who lands the cleanest strike. So as the headlines grew louder and the chatter mounted, Jasmine remained quiet, deliberate, waiting for the perfect moment. It wasn't hesitation, it was strategy. And while her silence made Karoline's camp smug with overconfidence, it was also setting the stage for a counterstrike so precise that it would turn the tables entirely. Because Jasmine wasn't just going to defend herself. She was about to strike back. And when she did, it would rewrite the story completely. Karoline Leavitt did not stumble into this fight by accident. Her rise in politics has been anything but subtle. From the very beginning, she cultivated a persona that thrived on confrontation. Young, telegenic, and unafraid to play the villain, she leaned into a style of politics where spectacle outweighs substance. For Karoline, outrage was not a byproduct, it was the product. She learned quickly that in today's media ecosystem, attention is the currency that buys influence. And she was willing to spend whatever credibility she had to make sure her name stayed in the headlines. Every appearance, every interview, every tweet was designed not to inform but to provoke. She perfected the smirk, the dismissive tone, the cutting one-liner that would travel far beyond the halls of government and into the feeds of millions. It worked. She carved out a place for herself in the culture war machine. Her fans hailed her as fearless, as someone who tells it like it is. They admired her defiance, mistaking it for strength. Her critics, meanwhile, saw the pattern, a shallow playbook built on mockery, distortion, and relentless attempts to delegitimize her opponents. But love her or hate her, one truth remained. Karoline Leavitt knew how to command attention. And that was her real goal in targeting Jasmine Crockett. This wasn't about policy or principle. It was about spectacle. Karoline spotted an opportunity. Here was an outspoken progressive congresswoman, already a lightning rod in conservative media circles. By launching an attack, Karoline could rally her base, stoke outrage, and keep her own name glowing in the headlines. To her, Jasmine wasn't a colleague or a rival. She was raw material for Karoline's brand of performance politics. But here's the danger in always playing the villain. Eventually, the performance becomes predictable. Audiences begin to see the cracks. The smirk starts to look forced, the insults recycled, the confidence a little too rehearsed. And in that predictability lies a fatal flaw: arrogance. Karoline had come to believe she could not lose. That every attack would land, every insult would stick. She underestimated her opponents, convinced that her microphone was louder, her reach wider, her stage unshakable. And so, when she set her sights on Jasmine Crockett, she thought she already knew the ending. Another target humiliated, another notch on her belt, another viral clip to feed her machine. But arrogance has one blind spot: it cannot imagine being outplayed. And that is exactly what was about to happen. Because in this story, Karoline's overconfidence wasn't a strength. It was the crack in her armor. And Jasmine Crockett knew exactly how to exploit it. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's response carried such force, you have to know the woman behind the tweet. Jasmine's journey was never paved with privilege or shortcuts. She grew up in a world that demanded resilience. In communities where dignity wasn't handed out freely, it had to be fought for. From a young age, she understood the weight of being underestimated. Teachers, peers, even colleagues would try to box her in, to silence her voice, to suggest that someone like her should know her place. But Jasmine never accepted those limits. She studied harder, spoke louder, and refused to fade into the background. When she entered law, she didn't chase prestige or the safety of corporate comfort. She chose the rougher road, defending the marginalized, standing beside those who had no voice, fighting for justice where others saw only risk. Courtrooms became battlegrounds, and Jasmine fought with the same fire that would later define her politics. Her decision to run for office wasn't born of vanity. It came from necessity. She saw systems failing the very people she had sworn to protect, and she knew that fighting case by case wasn't enough. She wanted to change the structures themselves. That leap into public service was another act of grit, another refusal to be silenced. And though the halls of power were lined with dismissive glances and whispered doubts, Jasmine stood tall. Every insult she absorbed, every headline that tried to caricature her, every opponent who sneered at her audacity, it only hardened her resolve. Because Jasmine understood something fundamental. Her story wasn't just her own. She carried with her the struggles of those who had been told they didn't belong. She represented communities that had always been talked about but rarely listened to. And with every speech, every debate, every appearance. She sent a clear message. She would not bow. That is why Karoline's attack struck such a nerve. It wasn't just an insult. It was a reminder of every time Jasmine had been dismissed, overlooked, or told to sit down. But Jasmine had already lived that story. She had survived it, defied it, and turned it into fuel. And so, when Karoline thought she was dragging Jasmine into the mud, she was actually giving her the perfect stage to prove, once again, that resilience always outshines arrogance. Jasmine's grit wasn't just about her personal survival, it was about representation. For every young woman, every immigrant, every voice pushed to the margins, her refusal to flinch was validation. It was proof that you can be attacked, underestimated, even mocked, and still rise. And all of that history, all of that fire, all of that defiance, was about to culminate in a moment that no one saw coming. A moment sharpened into just one tweet, ready to turn the tables with breathtaking precision. The spark had been struck. Karoline's attack wasn't a quiet jab whispered in committee. It was loud, deliberate, and designed for maximum spectacle. Within minutes of her post going live, the online ecosystem roared to life. Conservative outlets amplified her words with smug satisfaction. Comment sections filled with taunts and laughter. On cable panels, talking heads leaned in with the familiar tone of mock pity, calling Jasmine embattled or on the ropes. It was the oldest trick in the book: manufacture humiliation, then sit back while the echo chamber multiplies it. And for a moment, it seemed to work. Viewers scrolling through their feeds saw Karoline's insult plastered across screenshots, clipped into memes, spun into narratives of supposed weakness. To the casual observer, it looked as though Jasmine had been caught flat-footed, another casualty in the never-ending theater of cancellation. But here's the thing: Jasmine Crockett wasn't panicking. She wasn't scrambling behind closed doors with aides drafting statements or huddling with crisis managers. She was watching, waiting, measuring the rhythm of the outrage cycle like a seasoned fighter timing her counterpunch. That's what separates the performers from the leaders. Karoline wanted the instant splash, the 15-second clip that would trend for a day. Jasmine understood something deeper. Lasting power comes not from the first strike, but from the one people never forget. And so she let the noise build. She let her critics get comfortable in their assumptions. She let Karoline's camp believe the stage belonged to them. Behind the scenes, the anticipation grew unbearable. Supporters of Jasmine whispered online, "When will she respond?" Journalists speculated about what kind of statement might come. Even her opponents began refreshing feeds, waiting for some sign of defense. And still, nothing. The silence became its own kind of tension. Every hour that passed made the eventual reply feel heavier, more inevitable. It was as though Jasmine was pulling back a bowstring, letting the pressure build, holding her composure while everyone else fidgeted. And then came the moment. No press conference. No fiery rant on the House floor. No overproduced video statement. Just the subtle sound of fingers on a keyboard. A short burst of words. A tweet, composed with surgical precision, pressed into the world at exactly the right time. Those who saw it first didn't just read it, they froze. Some gasped, others laughed, many instantly hit share. Within minutes, timelines shifted. The very networks that had been mocking Jasmine pivoted, replaying her words in loops. Hashtags lit up. Screenshots raced across group chats. Supporters erupted in cheers, posting memes and GIFs that magnified the moment. It wasn't long, it wasn't loud, but it was lethal. Karoline had wanted to define Jasmine. Instead, Jasmine had just defined her.